Welcome to another exciting CTARA seminar. Let me begin by introducing the speaker, Professor Ashok Gadgil. Professor Gadgil has a doctorate in physics from University of California, Berkeley. He is a faculty senior scientist and co-lead for Water Initiative for the Energy Technologies of Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and a distinguished professor of Save Water and Sanitation in Civil and Environmental Engineering in UCB. He has substantial experience in technical, economic and policy research on energy efficiency and its implementation, particularly in developing countries. He has several patents and inventions to his credit. Dr. Gadgil has received several awards and honors for his work, including the Pew Fellowship in Conservation and Environment in 1991, for his work on accelerating energy efficiency in developing countries, the World Technology Award for Energy in 2002, the European Inventor Award in 2011, the Zayed Future Energy Prize in 2012, R&D 100 Award in 2016 and many more. He was elected to the National Academy of Engineering in 2013 and inducted in the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2014. In this seminar, he will describe his approach and illustrate it with some of his work towards providing safe drinking water to the bottom 80% of the population. On behalf of CTARA, I heartily welcome Professor Gadgil. Now I request you to start.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here back again at Bombay. And as the slide says, I'm going to talk about technology development and innovation for bottom of the economic pyramid, and illustrate what I'm going to say with some lessons learned. And I'm also going to throw you a challenge. The talk is in broadly three parts. Oops, this is off. Here we go. I hope this is somewhat better. You want to double check? What's it on? No? They take that. So right here. That's good. Okay. So, broadly speaking, the talk is in three parts. As many talks go, I'm going to start by telling you what I would have ended with. So up front, you will see what I think are the lessons learned. And then I'm going to illustrate it with two examples. One short article is kind of done to you, and a second one on my current work. And the challenge is for you to connect the last two parts with the first part, as you will see, as I identify. So, first of all, what's the base of the pyramid, or so-called bottom of the pyramid, right? It's the poorest socio-economic group, and different definitions exist as to what should be the cutoff. The World Bank says it should be $2.50 of income per person per day, at purchasing power parity, which means you correct for the local prices, about how much that $2.50 will take you. Government of India says the poverty line is 49 or 48 rupees per person per day. That's about 70 US cents. So different definitions exist, but it's clear what the income distribution looks like is the key. And this is what the income distribution looks like. Each horizontal line divides the world's population. This is global personal income distribution. Each horizontal line divides the population into 1/5. So, given that there are about 7 billion people represented from there to here, one of the slices is 1/5 of 7 billion. Okay? So 1.4 billion people approximately. So that's called quintiles, right? Q1, which is the bottom 1.4 billion people, earn 2% of the world's income. The next Q2, Q3, Q4, Q5, the top quintile earns about 70% of the world's income. we have a citation here in terms of the UNICEF working paper 2011, from which this data is taken. The world income distribution has not changed dramatically since that time, if at all. It has gotten worse. The disparity has increased in terms of the income distribution. So we are talking roughly, when you say bottom of the pyramid, if you, you see if you take the bottom 1/5 or the bottom 2/5, it's not a big deal of difference between their income. Right? So I'm not getting hung up on exactly what is the bottom of the pyramid. The way you define it is like 2% or 6% of the world's income is in the bottom 1/5 or 2/5 of the world's population. So the next slide talks about the report that came out earlier on this month from Ashok, and many of you probably saw that report that was picked up by many newspapers, including the Guardian of UK, CNBC, and so on, which listed the 8 richest individuals on the planet by name, who now own more wealth than the bottom half of the world's population. And the funny thing is, 1 year ago when the same report came out, the report had said about 64, maybe 68 people, the top 68 individuals owned as much as the bottom half of the world. And now it's only 8 billion. My God, what happened in 1 year? Right? But it turns out if you read the report, and that is available for you in English if you Google this, okay, on our UK website, you can download it as a big PDF document. What actually happened is not that the rich got richer that fast. They are getting richer all right, but not that fast. What actually happened was a reassessment of how poor the poor are. The largest pockets of poverty in the world exist only in 2 countries. Unprecedentedly poor people exist in large pockets only in India and China. Huge numbers, extraordinary poverty, which we are trained. I grew up here in this country, I grew up in Mumbai. We are trained not to see it because otherwise it drive you crazy, right? So part of the effort is to be able to see them. The reassessment of how poor the poor are reduce the amount of estimated wealth of the bottom half of the world's population. And that's why there are only now 8 people at the top whose wealth comes out to be equal to the 3.7 billion people in the Oscar website. And this is logical, or is obvious if you think for a minute, that the poorest of the poor live hand to mouth and don't accumulate wealth. The super rich have so much income that they accumulate wealth by default. They cannot spend it fast enough. So in other words, wealth is essentially accumulated income plus its own growth. That will be much steeper or more uneven than the income disparity, because the bottom people don't save anything and the top people cannot spend fast enough. So if you look at the way the disparity goes, it actually goes worse. So this quote comes from a very famous physicist. For a successful technology, now I'm changing topics about technologies for the poor. For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. And the guy who said this said it in a very harsh, sarcastic way, because there was a particular agency that got fooled into thinking that PR or public relations or press and getting accolades and prizes and awards is their main goal. And they lost sight of their goal. And the result was the Challenger disaster where a spaceship burned up. Okay? So this quote is from Richard Feynman, who was on this committee to analyze the Challenger disaster. And he said, this is what the core problem is. And when actually this Challenger accident, this is on the web also, you can Google it and find it. The committee did not want to put his quote in the report. They objected. And Feynman being Feynman and being on the committee, they said you can't suppress oil opinion, which is what I think is the real cause. So the compromise was, okay, you can put your own personal appendix. Okay? So that's why it appears in Appendix F, which is personal observations. The irony is, because it appeared in a separate appendix as Feynman's opinion, it got all the attention that they wanted it to avoid. Because now it is Feynman's appendix. So this is what should not happen when you develop technologies for the poor. Is you don't do it for the press, you don't do it for the prizes, you don't do it for, because nature cannot be fooled. And this is something that all of us should bear in mind all the time. But it's very easy to go down the path where you say, oh my God, this looks very sexy, attractive, and so on. Back to the four conditions which are kind of obvious if you give it a minute. So what are the four conditions which are important to be useful, effective, and scalable? Now the word scalable has two meanings. One meaning is if I take something from a tabletop to something that is full scale, then that is a technology scale growing up because now I got a bigger machine, right? A small motor versus something that is a megawatt motor, that's a scale up. The second meaning of the word scalable in the business sense is when you can make it replicable and it affects 10 million people, then you have scaled it from a single site to numerous sites. And I mean scalable in the second sense, not just making it bigger or larger, but actually not make it a boutique, handcrafted one little thing that sits in a museum. I don't want to do that. It's not worth your time to do that, okay? Your time is worth it only if it goes to scale. Otherwise, don't do it. This is Paul Polak's dictum as well about fighting poverty. If you think you have a solution for poverty, and he says if it affects less than certain number of people, drop it. Move on to the next problem. Think of something bigger and better. For me, I tell my students 10 million people should be the cutoff. If they are successful of what we are working on. If what you are working on is going to be, if successful, benefit at least 10 million people, then it's worth doing. So you set your own personal cutoff, but don't do bonsai gardening. Build something that will grow big. Affordable, obviously technically effective. You'll be surprised that I will put it there. How much PR goes into, I just heard today about water filters that don't work, that are sold to people who don't need them, and so on. Robust in relevant conditions, operating conditions, which are much harsher than conditions in the lab, and culturally appropriate, of course. That kind of stuff is important, but I would argue that it is surely correct but fatally incomplete. Okay, so this is kind of the first four conditions are there. You should have figured it out. You have to do it. If you didn't even do that, go back to school, right? But the next level, complexity, which is what my bottom line is, which is what I'm going to give you now, which is how I'm going to start, is the 3 lessons learned, and I would distill that into 1 lesson. The 3 lessons learned are first, for a new technology to be scalable, design cannot be separated from implementation. So even at the time when you are thinking of your solution, technical solution, you need to begin to imagine how it is going to be implemented, because that will come back and tell you what things you needed and what things are unobtainable. Or it relies on some piece of hardware that is super delicate, or has lots of delicate filaments, and requires replacement all the time. That's what it means that think of the implementation during the design phase. It's not an afterthought. The second one is social factors as critical to a technology success as those from engineering science, and we can go into that a little more when I condense that into a single lesson. You'll see how easy it is to at least condense it. It's hard to actually work through it. And the last one is you cannot afford to ignore all the other complexities of political economy and behavioral economics and organizational behavior and imperatives, institutional imperatives, cultural norms, social drivers, these can be fatal flaws when your little or my little dinky device, which works in the lab, when it goes out into the wilderness of the world outside my campus boundaries, the wild beast can eat it up unless I thought of how to defend and fit in with all the other forces that come out, right? Otherwise, it's going to not survive without lots of people protecting it, and that's not going to be scalable. So, how do I distill all these three into a single requirement? The single requirement is define and then be viciously critical of what is your theory of change. I've seen so many examples of technologies failing in the field that everybody thought were the right ones to work, and they seem to work in the lab, and it led to dismal failures in the field because the theory of change was flawed, was never articulated well, was not challenged, subjected to rigorous debate by colleagues. And I'm talking about very bright people from very good institutions and very good research groups. The theory of change refers to articulating, actually writing it down on how a particular intervention will result in positive societal impact. Okay? So, I never learned this. Nobody taught this to me, but ultimately I came to this point where, yeah, you're right. I should have been taught theory of change, or I should have figured it out. And now you look back and look at DFID, which is the big funding organization from UK, or many other funding organizations of that caliber, who ask for a theory of change test before they fund an intervention. Because they want to know, why do you think it will work? What change will it bring about? And will it bring about the positive change that you think that is promised? And maybe why not? Okay? So in other words, you are going to do some activities and you hope to have some positive societal impact. And the theory of change is this creature that connects the two. Right? And if you go to Wikipedia and type in the words theory of change, you'll find several screenfuls of good writing that will guide you to what is theory of change. A lot of sociological literature and so on references from the Wikipedia. So I don't have to go deeper than what I'm going to tell you in 2 more slides. First is, why articulate a theory of change? Okay? It forces you to show a causal relationship between the activity that you want to promote and the desired outcome. So if I am from the media lab of MIT and I said, my idea of promoting development is 1 laptop per child. What is my theory of change? That giving laptops to children who don't have enough food to eat, or who don't have a teacher coming to their school because there is no school building, or because there is no wireless, there is no internet connectivity, they don't have electricity. We are talking about 1.2 billion people who don't have electricity. I am giving 1 laptop per child. Will it lead to development? Will it lead to literacy? Will it lead to enlightenment and progress? What the hell am I thinking, right? But hey, you got now everybody looks back and says, what a stupid mistake, why didn't we catch it early? But 1 laptop per child went on, and tens of millions of dollars were wasted. And these are very smart people who did this, because you don't articulate this connection. You can force yourself to do this. Requires you to articulate assumptions of what are those assumptions that can be possibly measured and tested, so you know you're on solid grounds. Changes the viewpoint from what you want to do to what you want to achieve. What you want to do often is your sweet spot. It is a sweet spot on which you can get a little drunk, because it's sweet. You can do that particular piece of hardware very sweetly, very nice. I love my electronic gadget. Right? So that's what I want to do. But what I want to achieve is what I want to sell, which is positive social impact. If I work backwards, maybe it does not lead to my electronic gadget. right? So it forces you to work backwards from what you want to achieve and says, is there a causal link that we can prove? Helps you decide what you have to cut it out because that's what your goal is now. Not your little gadget, but that goal. And see if the link comes to that activity or not. If it doesn't, you can't defend it. And lastly, helps you identify necessary factors for your theory to work. Okay? So schematically, you can say what is under your control are the first three boxes, right? This is your activities. Inputs you can control, and outputs is what comes out if this particular activity was successful. What is not completely under your control, what you hope to achieve, is from those outputs to the outcomes, and presumably from those outcomes to the impact, right? Each of these can be unpacked, and in fact, it turns out that the connection between outputs and outcomes is not that single arrow. These three are single arrows because you are controlling the activity. There are other uncontrollable arrows, some of them supporting what you want to do, and some of them opposing what you want to do. And articulating the theory of change will force you to recognize those arrows and see if they are strong enough to overpower you or support you to get here. And same thing goes for impact. Right? So just to give you one example, here is a social impact theory of change from a group at Berkeley, electrical engineers and business students, who said if we design smart meters for state electricity boards in India, they are thinking of Madhya Pradesh, they are thinking of Madhya Pradesh, so that those smart meters will allow for better metering, more reliable metering, more accurate measurement of losses, more improved performance, more revenue to the MP electricity board. Maybe the whole system will turn out into better. So then they went out in my class and articulated their theory of change by listing each of those boxes in detail. The details of the boxes are not important. They will change according to what you wish to do. But the core point is that this is the kind of articulation you want, and these are the boxes you want to be able to do it. So I will now get into two illustrative innovations for safe drinking water. And the challenge, of course, for you is to guess my theory of change and behind each of them. Okay. First, which is out of my hands now, is about affordable drinking water for about 1.5 billion people who live without affordable safe drinking water. And second one is about removing arsenic from drinking water for about 200 million people worldwide, but close to maybe 80 million in India who drink arsenic. So example one is about affordable safe drinking water. What you're looking at is a woman in Dhaka hospital. I took that picture a few years ago, trying to feed rice gruel to her daughter, Asma, sitting on the bed at the largest hospital in Dhaka, that's called the Cholera Hospital. And the wording is obvious that even in 2009 December, the largest hospital in Dhaka is called the Cholera Hospital. Even in December, all the wards were full. And I said, where do you keep your patient during monsoon? When all the fecal matter gets washed into water supplies and diarrheal outbreaks happen all over the place. Well, they said, don't worry. Even though our wards are full now, and our corridors are full as well, when the monsoons come, we take over the entire parking lot and cover it with waterproof tents and put cots underneath, and that's where we keep additional patients, and that's our overflow parking lot. That's what happens with the cholera hospital. And of course, in one of the waterborne diarrheal disease, one of the worst ones, are still around all over the place. So I started off by saying, what are my design criteria? And then you'll see some of the statement about integrating implementation with the design criteria being integrated right here. So it must meet or exceed WHO criteria for water disinfection. It must be energy efficient, 60 watts, disinfects 1 ton per hour. Must be low cost, 4 cents, disinfects a ton of water. 4 cents includes the amortized capital cost, plus cost of consumables, plus electricity. Must be reliable, mature components, so I don't need delicate new stuff that is manufactured. Can treat unpressurized water, rapid throughput within 12 seconds, low and simple maintenance, no overdose risk, and fail safe. So those criteria came out of paying attention to saying what's going to be the implementation of it. So I'm also giving you dates to give you an idea of how long you have to run. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Even to do something as simple as a UV water disinfector, which is same as AquaGuard, essentially. No new science here. For the poor. Okay. So lab design was completed, lab testing was completed in 1996. This is what the factory made device looks like. It's about the size of a kind of kitchen microwave oven. And you take off the cover and electronic, this is what it looks like on the inside. Factory production started in 2000 from a licensee called Water Health. And here is a picture from the village Mominapadu. This woman is collecting water from a tank, which is essentially a man-made pond in the state of Hyderabad. She'll make close to 10 trips every day, collecting water on the shoulder. This is her way of drinking water, which is quite funny to her home. This is what it looks like in 2005 in the same village. This is the most elegant, beautiful building in the village with glass walls. I was against it. I was in favor of building something like that, look like a sturdy garage box, concrete box. But the water health people who know the marketing that I know, they said this must be the aspirational, most elegant, most attractive thing that all other villagers from all neighborhoods are jealous of. Okay? So let's sink money in building. I said, somebody will throw stone in front. I said, no, nothing like this will happen. We take that risk. And actually the villagers, what they did was at their own cost, they built a beautiful fence around this building. And they would bring neighbors and show this neighboring village residents and show this with pride. And they were still living in mud walls and straw thatch houses, but this was looking better than a bank building without the guard with a gun in the front. And that changed everything in terms of how people thought, wow, I can now drink water which the cricketers and the ministers and film stars drink on TV because they could afford it. Okay? This is what the inside looks like. This is the UV water works units inside. This is a guy collecting coupons which are given out to the villagers when they give money. They get coupons. They exchange coupons to fill a 20-liter containers. Here are kids probably displaying one of those containers. In 2007, they sold water for 1 rupee for 10 liters, and that pays off the bank. The bank pays 70% of the equity. The village panchayat pays 30% of the equity. The bank gets paid back the equity with interest at commercial rates in India, which are horrifically high, I think. And then it covers maintenance costs and salaries of 2 part-time local employees, and so on. Now the prices have gone up with inflation and local incomes rising, but this is how it worked. It got a bunch of awards, but really what matters is that it works and is attractive and is aspirational. And people come and buy the water and they believe that this is what actually keeps diarrhea out of their homes. This is the installation in Ghana. Ghana announced last week that they want to go to 20 million people that they will serve in the next 5 years. Their ramp up is very steep. Water Health India has already announced that they want to aim to go to 100 million people by 2020, which is a very aggressive target. Here is another photo from a different water health sector. You will notice that these are all prefab buildings, and that was a high cost, high reliability, rapid assembly option, because the early buildings that Water Health built in India, which are cheaper, concrete buildings, you had to rely a lot more on high quality workmanship. And if some cement bags got stolen along the way, the walls started cracking or the roof started leaking, then you lost the aspirational aspect. So now the building comes on a truck, and all the local people end up doing is work on the base concrete slab, and the rest of the building gets assembled, operated, and within 4 weeks is up and running, including casting of the slab. This is the 500th Water Health Center in 2012 in India. When some senators came for its opening, I just want to show that when I showed you the first one, 10,000 people were getting safe drinking water. And by now, we have 7 million people getting safe drinking water. And out of this, there is an independent social survey to validate, are these really poor people? And the survey says that 80% of their customers are below the poverty line in India. And of course, the statistical life saved is just an estimate. It's about 2,000 children, most at age 2015, age 5. Most importantly, this is not charity, this is for profit, a social enterprise that makes this work. Okay? And the first time in their life that is indeed the case. It's quite shocking and very happy to see this, of course, but still quite shocking. That is the first time that they can afford on a routine basis without blinking to buy 10 liters of drinking water. Right? So now I'm going to change to example 2 in progress work on arsenic. So I want to start by explaining to you why is it so important to bother with arsenic, right? Why bother with arsenic in drinking water, which is now affects tens of millions of people in India? This curve, this distribution, is the risk profile published in the Science magazine in 2002. And here's the citation, which shows what is the incidence of excess internal cancers from waterborne carcinogens among 100,000 people who are drinking that water for their life at its maximum contaminant level. Because there are waterborne carcinogens of all kinds and they are all regulated on certain risk level, there is a particular number. There is a particular number that says that if you consume water over your life with ethylene dibromide, which is a potent carcinogen, then 100,000 people over their life at its MCL will get about 12 cancers over the baseline. And this is all one at a time kind of study, so we are not looking at combined figures. Okay? And now I'm going to show you what on this graph what arsenic looks like at its MCL. Please pay attention to the vertical axis of this graph that currently tops up at 14 cancers or excess cancers over life. This is what that looks like. At its MCL, which is 10 parts per billion or 10 micrograms per liter, okay, 10 ppb, consuming that 10 ppb arsenic over a lifetime by 100,000 people will cause little more than 700 internal cancers. And in rural areas, most of these cancers are undetected until the person has the cancer has metastasized. It's too late. You just lose the person. Okay. So here is the citation for the risk reference, which you can also find on the web. Just Google that particular EPA report. And I've talked to the authors of both the Smith et al. Paper, that's Alan Smith, who is a professor at Berkeley, and I've talked to the person who was on the review panel, Michael Bates, who is also a professor at Berkeley. And we'll show that I have my own spreadsheet and calculated these numbers again, and this is part, this is correct. So my research assistant created this chart to give you an idea of what risk we are talking about. Now it turns out that the tens of millions of Indians we are talking about who are exposed to high levels of arsenic in their drinking water are drinking arsenic at 250 ppb. We have measured arsenic at 600, 700, 800 ppb. And because arsenic is colorless, odorless and tasteless, they don't know what they are drinking unless they go and test that water. And testing the water cost for arsenic costs about $10 or 700 rupees. And they don't even know where to go, and the testing centers are unreliable in terms of what they will tell you. So there's all kinds of uncertainties that face this field. So we started this work back in 2005 and went quickly from a beaker scale to something that is 600 liters per batch reactor. From there, I'll take a minute to go into the chemistry, though I know many of you are not electrochemists. The challenges are that we need to remove arsenic 3 and 5 both. And what we end up doing is we dissolve analytically a steel plate which produces Fe2 plus in the water, and through a Fenton-like reaction, Fe2 plus goes through Fe4 plus, which is transient, which is a potent oxidizer, and it drops down to Fe3 plus. In doing so, it also oxidizes arsenic 3 to arsenic 5, because arsenic 3 is hard to grab. It does not is not an ionic solid, but arsenic 5 salts are ionic. So you want to push them to arsenic 5, and that Fe4 plus, when it drops to Fe3 plus, oxidizes your arsenic 3 to 5. So now all of your arsenic is in a 5 state, and that's what you can grab with Fe3, and then it coagulates and settles up. Okay. And that happens with the help of dissolved oxygen as well. So concurrent multiple processes, you have Fe2 turning into Fe0 into Fe2 plus, Fe2 plus turning into hydrated Fe oxide. It absorbs arsenic, silicate and phosphate, and then of course on the cathode you get oxygen evolution. All these parallel processes, essentially I split them into what is happening. They have their own kinetics. I don't have to read them out to you. So we need to understand all the kinetics that is going to happen, all the rate processes that are going to happen, all the variables that I am going to control, and these are the variables that I am going to control. Some of them are given to me, like arsenic concentration is out of my control. But what I can control is the reactor design, plate area, volume, area per volume, separation between the plates, the recirculation rate, current density J, which is how many amps that pumping per square centimeter of the electrode, current charge loading Q, that's how many coulombs per liter I am dumping in the water, the dosage rate dq by dt, electrolysis time, mixing, and so on. So that requires interesting, exciting, good electrochemical work. That leads to papers and PhDs also on the side, which is good. But also leads to insight into how to design your reactor. So, what I'm trying to do with this process is grab that little red ball. That's my arsenic contaminant. But concurrently with that contaminant, there is phosphate shown by the green dots and silicate shown by the blue dots in those same proportions. And those green dots and blue dots are going to be absorbed onto my absorbent, competing with my trying to grab that red ball. So it gives you an idea of how hard it is to drive everything down to 10 ppb or below 10 ppb, and that's what makes this an interesting, challenging problem worth your attention or worth my attention. It's like take on something tough and it's worth your time, right? Because it's also important for the people to whom it may benefit if it all works out. So these are the results from our field test. This is the spool where we set up the reactor. Here you see we are well below 5 ppb. This is the WHO MCL of 10 ppb. Initial arsenic was 250 ppb. And here we are producing arsenic with an average value that's close to 2.2 ppb. This was our small 600 liter reactor. Then we went on. Now this is what these people are drinking. Their risk at 250 ppb lifetime consumption, not the 600, not the 800, right? Is 18 excess cancers over 100 every 100 people, and that's consistent with the paper in Lancet that actually tracked a cohort of 1500 Bangladeshi adults and found that 21% of the adult deaths in Bangladesh in arsenic affected areas are from arsenic related causes. So numbers are within approximately roughly looking comparable to what Lancet epidemiologists find and what EPA assessment report finds. And this is what our technology does. ECAR brings that risk down from about 1800 or 18,000 cancers per 100,000 people all the way down to something like 700 cancers, so 0.7 per 100 as we saw earlier. Now actually that risk is at 10 ppb, but we are driving the concentration of arsenic even below 10, right? So I'm not promising that, but that's the goal. And this is the scale of the reactor now. It's a huge reactor. There are two of those. Each one is 1.2 cubic meters, and the plant throughput is 10,000 liters a day. And we've been operating that since April of 2016. And it's commissioned. We can drink the water. It's safe. Machines from which they can collect 250 ml water for free for dispensing cycle. And this is school kids collecting that water for drinking because there is no other water other than hand pumped delivered water. And these are all our data from April through November end, showing you that average is 3.5 micrograms. That's what we're able to deliver now. So recap is define your theory of change before investing serious efforts in developing technology, so you have some model of how things are going to connect, right? And my own group's various research projects are at Gadgil lab.berkeley.edu. And this is where I want to stop and take questions. I think we are going to finish in good time. Thank you. Questions? Yes. Are you back? I thought you raised it. Yes.
How does the two of your purifier connect? Other than arsenic, there may be other impurities.
We have tested once a month by having a third party coming, NABL lab, National Accreditation Board Certified Labs, to come in and collect the water and test it for entire Indian IS 10500 2012, which is the whole thing. They collect and measure everything. And we know that our water meets all the standards. Post electrocoagulation, there is flocculation and tube cellular, so we are not using mechanical filters. Post that, there is tertiary processing through UV light, so we don't think that needed, because later on we proved that the Penton reaction also oxidizes viruses and bacteria. Both Rh positive and Rh negative bacteria. Subsequent to that, there is some micron filter just as to polish the water. So we meet all of IS 10,000. There is no other contaminant in the water. This is common. Yes. We have an industrial partner who's taken a license from the University of California to commercialize the technology, and they are part of this setup. So we designed it, we helped build it, we operated it, and on 30th of this month, we'll hand them the keys. They have been operating it shoulder to shoulder, but next week we will actually hand them full control and stand in the background, only if asked will answer questions. And we'll continue that for 3 more months. Because the license is non-exclusive, any other company can also come and build these and sell the water. The local price of water that local people are buying, which they hope is arsenic free, but which has never been tested. And we believe it is not, because all they have upstream is the RO plant and a filter. That median price is 1 rupee 50 paise. For us, the operating, the supplies consumables cost. Consumables cost meaning the chemicals and the steel and electricity is 1/20th of 1 cent per liter, or 3.5 paise per liter, at 70 rupees a dollar. So I think there is plenty of margin to pay salaries, plenty of margin for some business profit, for management, for marketing, all the necessary linkages that have to be done. And so this should be a viable business. It's not a franchisee model in that sense. The company can do what they want, and other companies can also license it from university and do what they want. And they may choose to have a franchisee, but that's their I don't know where they will go. They need to practice, first of all, operating this plant and gain more confidence. Yes.
What happens to all the arsenic removed from the water?
Excellent. Very good question. Question is, what happens to the arsenic removed from the water? Arsenic atoms, of course, don't go away. You got to deal with them. So currently, the sludge is collected by a team of people. This is a temporary thing because the research team at Jalapuri Civil Engineering want all the sludge that they can get. Because they have a research project on embedding that sludge in concrete. The Chinese do this, the research group in the US that has done this, but they want to do it themselves and double check with with Indian sludge, with Indian co-contaminants. How does it weaken the crushing strength of concrete? To what extent can we put that sludge? That will go on until about September of this year. Long term, the right way to do it would be, I think, to still embed the sludge in concrete. The Chinese do this on a routine basis, but it's not something for which there is any guidance in the Indian legislation or rules. So for now, we included the cost of collecting the sludge once a year, and I'll tell you why, and sending it to the hazardous chemical waste dump in Haldia, where it will be disposed of by the local chemical hazardous operator, Ramki. The reason we collect the sludge only once a year is because per person per year, the sludge is only 250 grams. So there is not enough sludge for Ramki to come and collect it more often. So currently the sludge gets collected in a bucket, in a cage, in a drum, in a cage. The cage is locked. And eventually the Ramki guys will come and take it away. But for now, Jalapur University is taking it. Yeah.
But I'm trying to connect the dot of thinking of implementation when you design.
Correct. Very much so.
Yes, I realized one point where you said having a prefabricated structure instead of that. But apart from that, any other point where you think design, the implementation part was an essential part of the thinking process while designing?
Many, right? For example, we decided very early on not to make the disinfector even for UV water, not to make it household device. Household device means that because people don't want something where you drip out water one drop at a time, and you don't want a little small lamp because they don't want to wait. They want 12 seconds. So that is part of the design. If you deliver them enough water for their household, your capital equipment is sitting there for 23.5 hours. And half an hour a day you are using it. That means that your capital amortization cost gets loaded for the whole day onto only half an hour of water production. This plant is fully automated. So long as there is electricity, it will pump the water, collect it in the reservoir, pump it through the machinery, store it in the dispensing tank. So you can operate it 20 hours a day and produce as much water as needed by the community. That distributes the capital cost on a much larger base now. It operates 20 hours a day rather than half an hour a day. That reduces the capital burden on the unit of water. Plus, I now design for much larger throughput. But I designed actually, ideally, the best throughput I can get for 60 watts of electricity is 4 times larger than this. Okay? So I could have designed, and I did design my first UV water disinfector to treat 60 liters per minute. And when we tested it in Uttar Pradesh, the villagers tolerated it. But they basically said, sir, we'll never ever have 60 liters per minute flow. And they teased me that I had built a device that was this large, and they said, this looks like a steel coffin. They wanted something that is compact and that matches the flow of their water sources. So I went back and said, what is the water flow source that is consistent with the model of not piped water supply? And that would be the India Mark II pump. If you swing India Mark II pump, that is an enormous 6-foot handle, if I swing it maybe 20 times a minute, I get only 12 liters a minute. So I designed this to be 15 liters a minute. So now it is not as efficient as it could be, but I tuned it to what people want. So I got to make those compromises. It still uses 6,000 times less primary energy than boiling water to disinfect it. So now I sacrifice instead of 20,000 times, it's only 6,000. So that's another component. There's lots of those inside. Okay, there's a fail-safe device, for example. If either electricity fails, or the lamp fails, or the water magically becomes opaque to UV light because of some contaminant, the inlet valve cuts off, which means no water will come out of the device. That is not disinfected. And I learned that in the bad way in my field test in South Africa, where I was at a HIV hospice for infants who were HIV positive, abandoned by their moms, and there was no clean water, so we were doing testing of this in the HIV hospice. And when I went there, I drank water from the device, saying it's fine, it should be fine. I know it was very well. It turned out that the electrician had unplugged the device and never plugged it back in. Thank goodness I didn't get a bad case of diarrhea. But with a fail-safe valve, if you unplug the device, it cuts off. No more chance of any malfunction letting out any water that will not be disinfected. These kind of things, you think that they are small, but they can make a big difference. Okay? I think the time's up. Thank you. Yes, one question.
Theorize this as written about that theoretical part. For example, you say that output to outcome. There are multiple factors weighing in on that process.
I'm not a social scientist, boss. All I do is I just figure out how to make it work in one case at a time. But I know enough to think about it. But to actually theorize it and write it in the context of what is done, I guess we'll do it sometime. We have to do it sometime. But I need to work with somebody who is much better steeped in social science theory and make that connection. Because there are so many examples. There's an example of a device called a play pump. If you just Google play pump, you will find another disaster. If you Google the word embrace, which is an infant warmer, that raised $15 million. That was Stanford. Total number of devices in use for infant warmer embrace is 400. That's it. You got nowhere. There's another thing where you have to suck water out of a tube. And the pictures are horrific of people standing chest deep in filthy water. Who's going to do that? What do we think we are? But those things are so wrong. So we could have gone on longer on how things fail, but writing it up would be really a good idea. So, good. Yeah.
What are the lessons from the first field implementation of the first project, which was sort of came in handy while designing the second one? Are these two completely separate?
They are completely separate two projects. One has been licensed to Water Health India now, right? I have no role to play in what they are doing, other than being the inventor of the device. And I'm happy for their success, of course. But the lessons learned are in terms of how maintenance, for example, at a community scale, is the appropriate approach for water for a community that already collects water by going outside their house to a central point. So I'm not asking for a major behavioral change, right? I'm also paying attention to user acceptance, paying attention to institutional linkages. I'm paying attention to having opinion leaders convert first, rather than fighting uphill from the bottom of the ignorance slope. So those are the kind of subtle lessons, but I haven't listed them out explicitly. They become part of how you think about technology. But this particular theory of change is a higher way in which you could think about any technology that goes out through outputs to outcomes and outcomes to impact. So it doesn't have to be water. This is just an example. Okay? Any closing question? Thank you very much.